Hey, Arlo and Frank. I am at Little Talbot Island State Park in Jacksonville, Florida. It's probably 15 to 20 miles north of our home, but it's in the city of Jacksonville. I'm coming to you for the first time since getting some of my new teeth. On the bottom, I have temporary crowns and bridges and all kinds of stuff like that. In a couple of weeks I go back and get the permanent bottoms, and then next year I get the tops done. So I'm lisping a little bit, but I decided to make it through these things while I was going through all this stuff. And the teeth are just one of the things that I'm dealing with right now. But I wanted to just keep going through them and not stop, because you never know if you're going to be here tomorrow. Today, I want to talk to you about the smells of the old neighborhood. Growing up in Philadelphia, generally, but in Fishtown / Kensington specifically. Now, I always thought that I lived in Kensington, but some people who live right where I used to live call that Fishtown. I'm sure that there's some map someplace that shows you exactly where Fishtown starts and ends. Like if you live at K&A, Kensington and Allegheny, you're definitely in Kensington. But Fishtown, Kensington boundaries are a little bit gray area. I think people don't want to be known as a Kenzo. I'm a proud Kenzo. I don't care. I mean, I am who I am, and that made me part of who I am. But some people are like, oh, I'm from Fishtown. Anyway, every summer, your great grandmother, Clark, Nana, would take me and eventually my little brother, Richard, to Stone Harbor. And we'd go as soon as school let out. And we'd be there all summer. During the summer, I would be barefoot every day. I would wear either a bathing suit or shorts. We had a cat named Ingebar, and Ingebar would be clean. It was an outdoor cat, so whether we were at the shore or we were in Philly, the cat went outside. And the cat would be all clean. And then Labor Day would show up. We would head back up to Philadelphia. And we would always get there after dark. We would leave on Sunday in the afternoon, and then we'd stop for dinner. But by the time we got to the Ben Franklin Bridge, it would be dark or getting dark. And I remember you'd get maybe halfway across the bridge, and the odor of industrial Philadelphia would hit you. My mom used to call it Philadelphia. Oh, we're in Philadelphia, everybody. And we'd come down off that bridge and drive home and get out. And it was usually a hot summer night. And it would be oppressively humid, hot. There was no ocean breeze, the salt air, which helped you go to sleep. Philadelphia doesn't help you go to sleep. I think it's better now. I haven't been there much in the last few years. But that wasn't the only smell. There was a smell on every corner. On every corner, there was a bar. And as you went past the bar, you'd smell two smells: vomit and Lysol. I think I prefer vomit. I think it's the least nauseating of the two, but. And I remember that all these bars had a regular entrance right on the corner, but then on the side, they had a ladies' entrance, because at one point in time, ladies weren't allowed to go in through that door. Now, everybody sat at the same bar, so I don't know what the whole deal was with the ladies' entrance. But one time we were at my grandparents' house at 2441 Survivor Street, I think was the address. And we went to the bar down at Cumberland and Survivor with my Aunt Elsie. She was actually my great Aunt Elsie, so she would be your great Aunt Elsie. I did a video about her and Aunt Babe, her sister, who hung out together. They were the spinsters. And my little brother Richard was with us. And we went in, and he was just a little guy. I mean, he was walking and stuff. He was probably 3 or 4. It seems like everything that happened to Richard happened when he was like 3 or 4 years old. And everything was involving his head. So we went in the ladies' entrance of the bar. And the reason that we did that was my parents drank what they called booze. They had a bottle of whiskey, and they would take that to my grandparents' house. My nan and grandpa didn't drink. My Aunt Sis, who I did a video on, she did drink. She drank wine. So she'd have wine there. My parents would bring their alcohol, and usually nobody else would stop down. That was a Friday night thing. But one time Aunt Elsie was there for some reason. And she said, "Do you have any beer?" The answer was no. Well, you had to buy beer at a bar. You couldn't go to a grocery store and buy beer at that point in time. I don't know if you can now even. I know Pennsylvania was always weird. They had state stores and all to buy hard liquor and beer distributors to buy beer. I don't know if that's still true or not. But anyway, back then you could go in, you could buy up to 3 quarts at one time. So she came in and bought 2 quarts of beer. And she walked up to the bar to order the beer, and there was this drunk sitting at the bar smoking a cigarette. And he started chatting to her like, hey honey, that kind of stuff. And Aunt Elsie wasn't having any of it. But he saw Richard there, and he went like, look at this cute kid. And he reached to grab like a $1 bill off the bar and give it to my brother. And as he did it, his hand went down, and the cigarette burned Richard right in the forehead. Like, you could hear it go. And he screamed, and the guy was like, it's okay. And they I don't remember them doing anything. Nobody like put ice on it. Nobody called 911. Today there would be a newspaper article. They'd be shutting the bar down. There would the guy would be in rehab or something for burning some little kid's head with a cigarette. But in a bar in Kensington on a Friday night back in the, I guess that was in the 1960s, the early to mid 1960s, that was just another night. There was also a store on every corner. The ones that I remember are at Frankfurt and Dauphin. There was a supermarket called Silverstein's, and it had many smells. It was, they had the meat market and the fresh vegetables and all that. It was smaller than a supermarket is today, so it was more intimate, and you were closer to the smells, especially when they were selling fish. there was a place called Wahlberg's. It was on the corner of, let me see, Cedar and Dauphin, and we lived at 2352 East Dauphin Street at the time. It was kind of catty corner from our house, right on the corner. And they sold what was called dry goods. That was garments and shoes. So you would smell the garments. It's different. You walk in a Kmart today, you don't necessarily smell the clothes. But back then, clothes were made out of more natural fibers and things, and shoes were made out of real leather. And you could smell that. And I remember those smells. Right down the street from there was Mr. Snyderman's shoe repair shop, and that had the real leather smell and the smell of shoe polish and the chemicals that this guy used in the shoe business, in the shoe repair business. And he actually would repair the shoes. He would resole them and do things like that. And my dad knew all these people. My mom too, probably. So they knew me when I was going past. They would say hi and stuff like that. And there were corner stores, a lot of them. I want to talk about two of them. One was down the street from my grandparents' house on Survivor Street. It was at Survivor and, is it Letterly? In between, yeah, I think they were at Survivor right off of Haggard, and so it would be Letterly Street. Right on the corner, it was called Jerry's, and had a sign that said Jerry's, but my dad called it Brecky's, and my grandpa called it Brecky's, and Aunt Sis called it Brecky's. So eventually I said, well, Mom, why do you call it Brecky's? Well, that's Jerry Breck. She didn't always own it. Her dad did, and he was Brecky. So it's always going to be Brecky to us. That was where we would go on a hot summer night. My grandpa would take me. We'd walk down to Jerry's, and they had these big round containers of ice cream in a case. And I could get any kind that I wanted. I got one scoop, and the scoops were big. But my grandpa always got 2 scoops. And we'd have this big bowl, and they'd put the scoops. Each person in the family would say what they want. Oh, I want peach. I want butter pecan. And they would just lump them all into the same bowl. It was only a few doors down. And then we would run them down to my grandparents' house, put them in separate bowls, and sit out on the stoop on the front step. They had these little marble steps in the neighborhood. It was a row home neighborhood. And we would sit there and watch the world go by and eat ice cream. And then on York Street, maybe Memphis and York, there was a place called Cheap Joe's. Now, before I was born, there was a man named Cheap Joe, and he had the store, and he must have been cheap. It never had a sign that said Cheap Joe's. I think it might have said Joe's, if it said anything. By the time that I was able to go into stores, he was dead and gone, and his daughter had taken over. And her name was Fat Marie. And the reason it was Fat Marie was she was barely able to move behind the counter. And it was one of these places that had a counter, and then behind her, there were these shelves, and the shelves went way up, and she had this grabber thing, a pole with a grabber on it. And she could grab things off. And we used to order things. We used to order things from the top shelf just to piss her off. And she'd go like, Jesus Christ. And then you go like, oh no, that's not the one I want. It's the one next to it. That was a fun place. No smells necessarily come back to mind about Cheap Joe's, but I am telling a couple stories that are not smell related, but they're store related. And the next one is a place that was at Cumberland and Survivor. It was called No Name. And the guy that owned the place was this like gruff, I don't know, like a chubby guy, hairy, chubby, unkempt guy in a wife beater. That was No Name. The store was No Name. He was No Name. If you asked him what his name was, he'd say, No Name, No Name. The store was dirty. If there was a smell I remembered, it probably would be a foul smell. And I went in there one time. Now, I would normally just go to Cheap Joe's if I wanted to get candy, because we lived at 2176 East York. We lived at York and Survivor, and that was the next block over, next to the old Hackett School, or a couple doors down from the old Hackett School. But for some reason, I guess I was at my grandparents' house, and I had been watching Sally Starr, who's this lady that was on TV. She was a cowgirl, like quote unquote cowgirl, who lived in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And I don't think she ever rode a horse or anything like that. Maybe she did. But she was a local celebrity, dressed up in a cowgirl dress. She had her own show. I was, I think, on the show one time. I think with the Glee Club we sang. Pretty sure that was on Sally Starr. But she said, well, you can get a discount on this product if you say Argyle South sent you. So I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was candy or a toy or whatever, but I had gotten the money to get this thing. But I only had enough money to get it with the discount, whatever that discount was. So I went into the store to No Name, and I put this thing on the counter, and No Name told me how much it was, and I said, Argyle South sent me. And he went, what? I said, Argyle South sent me. He says, what the hell is that supposed to mean? I said, well, Sally Starr said that if we said Argyle South sent me, that you give it to us for less money. And he looked at me and he went, they should string her up by her titties. So I was horrified. I was a little kid. So I thought he really wanted to do that to Sally Starr. Poor Sally. And ever since then, every time I thought of Sally Starr, I thought, poor woman. Hope she never goes in No Name store, because it's not going to be a happy ending to that. And then one last kind of store was the hoagie shops. We didn't really have steak shops right around where I lived, but there were some hoagie shops. And some of them made steaks, but the smell that I remember is the hoagies. There was this German lady. I sent Frank and Tom to the Lutheran school. I forget where that was. But on the way to that school, like halfway there, was this little deli hoagie shop that I would go into, and it was a German lady that owned the place, and she had something to do with the school. She may have had her kids there or something, so I knew her, and I went to that place for years, and I just always remember the hoagie smell. I know one time, well, several times, when I flew out of Atlantic City, they put a hoagie shop at the Circle right outside of the Atlantic City airport, and I'd stop and get a hoagie and eat it on the plane ride, and totally piss every passenger off, because as soon as I walk on, they'd go, "Why do I smell a hoagie?" And then one last smell story. In grade school at Hackett, I was on the safety patrol, and my post was at, I think it was Memphis and York, on the same corner as the Schlurer's Pickle Warehouse. There were these big garage doors, and they'd open them up, and they'd come in and load the barrels of pickles and other things like pickles, pickle-ish things, onto these trucks and haul them to stores in the area. I would go to school famished. Like, oh, I'm so hungry. Now, I was at that post 4 times a day because we went home for lunch. So my stomach would growl all morning, but then when we were going home for lunch, I'd be across the street and it wouldn't be that bad, but I still had quite an appetite by the time I got home. And then the same thing would happen in the afternoon, so I was hungry all afternoon. And in closing, maybe I got a love of my life from standing in front of the Schlurer's Pickle Warehouse. Because if you know anything about me, guys, you know that I love bubbles. Pickles are made from fermentation, from bubbles. And I love pickles now, and I loved pickles back then. And the sense of smell is supposedly the one that you remember the most. And when it comes to the old neighborhood, it definitely is the one that I remember most. Peace out, guys.